UFC light heavyweight champion Jamahal Hill relinquished his title last week after suffering an Achilles tendon tear. This is a serious injury that will require surgery and months of rehab. So, now that the title is vacant as of right now, and there is no fight booking to crown a new champion, what do we do? Mike Bond, what's your reaction to the unfortunate news, and what two fighters would you put into that vacant title fight? Volume.
Like, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys. Obviously a heartbreaker for Jamahal Hill, right? Like he had been waiting months and months at this point for Jiri Prochazka to get healthy. And then just when it seems like we're kind of on the verge to maybe getting that fight booked, jump into a training camp, something like that, this happens. And Achilles injuries are obviously very serious business, right? Like for a fighter, especially one like a power puncher like Jamahal Hill, who relies a lot on his athleticism and stuff, it doesn't get much worse than that for him. So obviously hoping that this isn't a super serious recovery. I don't know if there's like degrees of an Achilles rupture and things like that, but of course we give him our best wishes that it's not on the worst end of it, but just continuing the trend of this light heavyweight division being pretty much a disaster since John Jones vacated that title a little over 3 years ago now. I believe this is the fourth title vacancy in this division in 5 years, which is just remarkable to think about. All kind of the iterations we've gone through here. As far as like what kind of comes on the cusp of this, you have to imagine Jiri Prochazka is one half of the vacant title fight. He's more than worthy. He didn't lose his belt in the ring, or in the octagon rather. So he's got to be it, right? And I know there was some rumors floating around yesterday that maybe they were going to slap the vacant title on Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. In just a few weeks here at UFC 291, I reached out to the UFC and asked about that Facebook kind of promotion text that came out. They said it was a typo. It was like some copy that was rolled over from UFC 290 as far as like the promotion. And that's why it said 2 title fights. Take that for what you will. That's what their PR staff told me. So that's why I put it out there. So given that, I think maybe we just wait and see what happens with Alex Pereira and Jan Blachowicz, and the winner of that fights Jiri. But we also can't forget about Magomed Ankalaev, right? He's on a 10-fight undefeated streak. A lot of people feel he deserved that win against Jan Blachowicz back in December rather than it being a draw. So he's probably the most deserving in terms of merit, but we know how the UFC likes to book fights, that the people want to see and that are going to sell the most pay-per-views. And in my opinion, if Alex Pereira wins, he is the biggest name that people probably want to see in the title fight the most. And a fight with Jiri would be absolutely insane. So I think right now we just got to sit on our hands for a couple weeks here, see how that fight plays out in Salt Lake City, and then we'll have a much clearer idea of exactly what it's going to be.
That's why he's the MMA media titan. The other day I saw the unfortunate news. I'm making my coffee, wondering, could it be Hill? And well, this guy already had my answer for me. So yeah, great job, Mike Bond. Eric Nixon, what do you think, man? This had to break your heart. It's not your guy per se, but it's a guy that's been around, and you know what the setback can be for a professional prize fighter. Weigh in, please.
Man, I saw Jamahal at the PI when the news was handed down, and we have a running joke about some shoes and stuff like that. I saw Jamahal; he came in on a roller with his foot up, and right away I could just feel his energy, and I felt like I was there with him, and that was devastating to kind of see what transpired in the meeting that he had. But I think he did the right thing, and I understand that this division has kind of been in shambles, like Mike said, since John Jones has vacated the belt. But same thing happened with Jiri, unfortunately, an injury that I saw on my mats. He gave up his belt, he moved it on, and Jamahal Hill kept the division rolling. In this particular situation, it's interesting to think business sense for these guys, because you have to have a pay-per-view with a title fight attached to it. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do, if they try to wait and put somebody in that title slot to fill one of those pay-per-view voids later on down the line. As far as talent goes, I'm with you guys, man. I think Ankalaev is the guy to put in that at one Ankalaev, maybe Jiri. But if that winner out of the Pereira fight does the devastating fashion, then you can make your argument for filling in one of those guys as well.
All right, goes. We saw this guy on Saturday. Trying to piece it all together, man. It just breaks my heart that I couldn't tell him something at that moment. But just unfortunate what happened. Share your thoughts.
Well, when I heard he had given up the title, I mean, I thought, what is he doing? Like, what? Usually you don't really see that type of stuff. It's a very stand-up thing for Hill to do, something he didn't have to do, and I think it says a lot about himself and probably his love for the sport. But I was trying to piece together reasons why he could have done that, and one thing that kind of sticks out for me is whenever you're dealing with a recovery process, whether that's physical or whether that's drugs, alcohol, the biggest enemy of that process are distractions. And possibly maybe giving up that title is his way of eliminating that, right? He's a young cat. And maybe by doing that, now he can return on his own timeline. He doesn't have to worry about meeting certain goals, because a lot of times fighters are their own worst enemies. They want to get back out there, especially when you're holding that big title and you're seeing somebody else walking around with it. I think sometimes they could speed things up a little too much. This is a serious injury. We've seen it happen across the board in all sports. You really have to take your time. I commend Jamal for doing that, and I hope he does take his time, because when he comes back, and I think he probably knows this, I think the UFC likes him. The fans love him. We love to see him fight. He's been kind of a company guy so far, so I think when he comes back, everything's just going to fall back into place for him. But for now, I think he has to take his time, and we'll have to see. Blachowicz and Pereira, I don't think anything's going to get slapped on that, and we won't know until Blachowicz is in the air anyway, right? That's how he finds out. So I think going forward, I think it'd be nice if it were Jiri, and then the winner of that, if it's Pereira, like Mike said, holy crap, that'll be an insane fight.
Yeah. Mike, how close was Prochazka to coming back? Do you know anything about that, or do you, Eric, either one of you? Because I know Hill felt like this fight could happen in 2023, but that's still a whole half a year left. So I don't know what timeline he was thinking when he hadn't suffered the tear yet.
His manager, Tim Simpson, I think, was on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani like a few weeks ago, and he said that he was cleared and ready to go. So I think it was more just trying to find a date for it at that point. We obviously have a few pay-per-views left that aren't booked up through the end of the year, so I assume they were trying to work something out for there. But I mean, if you've anyone who's seen like Jamahal Hill kind of rolling around in the last few months, he's obviously maybe not in perfect fight shape right now. So I think they're probably still working towards that, and camp had started at this point. So yeah, I think he's essentially ready to go, but I know there's some pressure starting to come on his side. Like, let's make this thing happen. Jamal was getting very antsy and trying to book a fight. And I think we were probably getting pretty close there. And this whole thing obviously just threw it out of whack, which maybe for Jiri is, the best case. Maybe he, as you were just talking about, there goes like Jamal maybe rushing back. I think Jiri was kind of getting to that area a little bit. And if this buys him another 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever, that could be for the best for him.
What I heard behind the scenes is that both Jiri and Jamal will get pay-per-view points when they come back, even though they aren't champions. And I think that's awesome, because that's one big moment, aside from being the best in the world, having the gold draped around your waist. It's that life-changing money that comes with it. So I do like hearing that. But guys, let me run this by you. Relinquishing titles. A lot of times I compare this to the torn labrum, which is what Jiri had, I believe. I compare this to the ACL. I've seen fighters just become the undisputed who sits on the sidelines when they bring in the interim. 2 times in a row, relinquishing. Your guys' thoughts there? Anybody have a problem with that?
I think it depends on the injury and how long the timetable is going to be, and how the division is going to be stacked up or held up, for that matter. So, when you have an injury where your fighter is going to be out for a year, especially like an Achilles injury like this, I think relinquish is the right call. I think that's the right call in this particular situation. But, hey, a guy might be out 3 to 6 months. Relinquishing might not be the answer. Maybe an interim or something like that might be a better void to fill that time to keep the division fresh and moving. But, I really just think it's depicted on each situation and the injury.
See, I feel like a lot of fighters champions might let a whole year go by without defending anyway, and they're healthy. That's why I thought, that's a little bizarre to me. We saw him jump the gun with Francis a few years ago when he couldn't fight in August, but he'd fight in September. But instead, they do Lewis versus Gane for the interim, and he wasn't injured. This is a guy that just wanted to go to Africa and show the belt off, see family and interim, but yet there was no real injury at that time. It's the most bizarre thing when it comes to these titles, how the UFC works. But relinquishing, I don't know. I like the moment of having a fighter defeat the undisputed and get that moment. When you don't get that moment, it's a little bit different. It's kind of like what they call putting over in pro wrestling. And when you fight for a vacant title, you don't have that moment. So that kind of
Yeah, I
That's why it
think
kind of-
it's just circumstantial, kind of like Eric said there. And I mean, if you want to be devil's advocate here, you could say maybe, Jamahal Hill was fortunate to get his title fight and
True.
that belt anyways. His was circumstantial because not only Jiri vacating, but then the draw that we had in December, the UFC's need to have another title fight on that pay-per-view in Brazil in January. They slapped that together on very short notice. So the whole thing is just kind of chaotic. Not saying Jamahal Hill didn't deserve to be a champion or anything like that. I think he's one of the very best guys in this division, regardless. But the whole thing was just kind of weird timeline wise, and the way he got his belt to be like, hey, by the time he returns, it would probably be a year and a half or more between fights. And you're sitting there being like, okay, well, that's a long time to sit when you kind of fell ass backwards into the title shot anyways.